You won't believe what happened when 71-year-old Army veteran William Bill Anderson walked into the Riverside County Animal Shelter in California hoping for a quiet companion, and came face to face with the most heartbreaking sight of his life. In kennel number 47 sat Tucker, a 6-month-old German Shepherd who'd been surrendered 3 weeks earlier under mysterious circumstances. But when that traumatized puppy looked up and saw Bill, he burst into tears, pure joy mixed with devastating heartbreak. Shelter staff stood frozen. This wasn't just a chance meeting. It was a reunion torn apart by circumstances beyond control. Bill, a retired Army staff sergeant, carried the quiet dignity of a man who'd survived war and loss. He had shared a modest Riverside ranch home for 30 years with his beloved wife Sarah and their line of rescued German Shepherds. 8 months ago, pancreatic cancer took Sarah. In her final days, she insisted on adopting one more puppy, an 8-week-old German Shepherd they named Tucker. "One more baby to love," she whispered. As Sarah faded, Tucker became her gentle guardian and later, Bill's only companion. 4 months ago, a massive heart attack hit Bill during a walk with Tucker. The puppy responded heroically, barking nonstop for help, standing over his collapsed owner until paramedics arrived, and howling as Bill was taken away. Mrs. Hayes, a caring neighbor, took Tucker in for 2 agonizing weeks. He waited by the window, hoping Bill would return. Bill's daughter Emily flew down from Portland after the attack. She found her father critically ill and fragile, his heart function devastated. With Bill's future uncertain, Emily faced a crisis. Who cared? For Tucker? Mrs. Hayes was elderly and overwhelmed. Through a Facebook group, Emily found the Henderson family parents with kids, a yard, and a heart for large dogs. They seemed perfect. Emily transferred Tucker to them, believing he'd thrive while Bill recovered. For 3 weeks, things looked hopeful. The Hendersons sent updates, Tucker playing in their yard. Emily breathed easier, but slowly Tucker's spirit broke. He wouldn't eat. He chewed furniture. He howled all night. He stared at the gate, expecting someone who never came. Eventually, the Hendersons returned him to the shelter, confused, disappointed. Tucker heartbroken. And so Bill arrived that day, seeking solace in a quiet older dog. Instead, he found Tucker returned, traumatized, and still devoted. Their eyes met, and the shelter melted away. But there was a catch. Bill's heart was still fragile. His fixed income couldn't support a high-energy dog. His home full of stairs and memories was overwhelming. He had no choice but to leave Tucker at the shelter that day. It was a moment that shook him to the core, finding the companion he thought he'd lost, only to realize he might not be able to keep him after all. Yet Bill didn't give up hope. He left the shelter determined to find a way for temporary foster support, help from friends or community, anything that might let him bring Tucker home. This isn't just a story about heartbreak. It's about resilience, love, and what it means to risk everything for a second chance. Bill and Tucker deserve to stay together. Every share, every comment, every offer of help brings them closer to the home they both need. Leave a like, share your thoughts, and your city in the comments, and let's be the village that helps this Army veteran and his loyal pup find their way home. Most disturbing was his constant escape attempts. Tucker somehow managed to break through their fence twice, only Tobe found sitting on the street corner where Bill had collapsed, waiting with heartbreaking patience. The Henderson family, unprepared for a traumatized animal with complex emotional needs, quickly reached their breaking point. Mark Henderson called Emily with barely concealed frustration. "This isn't working out. Tucker is clearly not adjusting, and it's affecting our whole family. Our neighbors are complaining about the noise, and our own kids are starting to be afraid of him." Rather than returning Tucker to Emily or attempting to contact Bill, The Henderson family made a decision that will haunt the story's trajectory. They drove Tucker to the Riverside County Animal Shelter and surrendered him with a fabricated story. "We found this dog wandering as a stray," Jennifer Henderson told the intake worker, avoiding eye contact as Tucker trembled beside her. "We tried to find his owners, but couldn't locate anyone. He seems trained, but we can't keep him." The lie was deliberate and cruel. By claiming Tucker was a stray, the Hendersons avoided any questions about his history, medical records, or the circumstances that led to his surrender. They drove away as Tucker was led into kennel number 47, his confused whimpers echoing through the shelter corridors. The intake worker experienced in reading animal behavior noted Tucker's obvious training and excellent health in her report. "Suspicious circumstances," she wrote. "Dog shows signs of quality Korean professional training. Doubtful stray story." Emily, meanwhile, remained blissful unaware of this betrayal. The Henderson family had blocked her number and never contacted her about their decision. When she called to check on Tucker's progress, she discovered their phone had been disconnected. Her attempts to visit their address revealed an empty house with a "for rent" sign in the yard. The family had moved, leaving no forwarding information and no trace of what had happened to Tucker. For 3 weeks, Tucker languished in the shelter, his depression deepening daily. The vibrant, intelligent puppy who had once provided comfort to a dying woman and heroically protected his unconscious master became a shadow of himself. He refused to interact with potential adopters, spent most of his time pressed against the back wall of his kennel, and showed alarming signs of giving up the will to live. Shelter staff tried everything to lift his spirits, but Tucker seemed to be waiting for someone who wasn't coming. Bill, still recovering and unaware of Tucker's true fate, asked Emily about his beloved companion during their daily phone calls. Emily, unable to locate the Henderson family and unwilling to admit her mistake, continued the fiction that Tucker was adjusting well to his new home and happy with a family that can give him the attention he deserves. Each deepened her guilt, but she convinced herself it was kinder than telling her recovering father that his faithful companion had vanished without a trace. The truth finally emerged through the neighborhood network that had sustained Bill throughout his recovery. Mrs. Hayes, who had maintained contact with other neighbors, learned about Tucker's disappearance when she encountered Mark Henderson's brother at the local grocery store. The brother, unaware of the family's deception, casually mentioned that Mark and Jennifer had gotten rid of that German Shepherd at the shelter before moving to Arizona for Mark's job transfer. Mrs. Hayes immediately called Emily with the devastating news. "Your father's dog is in the shelter," she said without preamble. "Has been for weeks, and nobody told Bill." Emily's world collapsed as she realized the magnitude of her failure. She had trusted strangers with her father's most precious companion, and they had thrown him away like an unwanted burden. When Emily finally told Bill the truth, his reaction was swift and determined despite his weakened condition. "I'm going to find him," Bill declared, his voice stronger than it had been since the heart attack. "Tucker's been waiting for me, and I've failed him long enough." Emily tried to dissuade him, worried about his health and the emotional toll of potentially finding Tucker in poor condition, but Bill's mind was made. 3 days later, he drove to the Riverside County Animal Shelter, hoping against hope that his faithful companion might still be alive and waiting for the reunion they both desperately needed. The automatic doors of the Riverside County Animal Shelter whisked open as Bill Anderson stepped inside, his weathered hands gripping a worn leather wallet, and his military bearings still evident despite the obvious toll of recent months. A cacophony of barking dogs and bustling activity momentarily overwhelmed him, but he steadied himself against the reception counter and waited for assistance. James Wilson, the shelter director, emerged from his office after being alerted by the front desk staff about the elderly veterans. Arrival. Mr. Anderson, I presume? James extended a firm handshake, noting the man's careful movements and the slight tremor in his grip. I understand you're looking for a companion dog. We have several wonderful senior animals who might be perfect for your situation. James had reviewed Bill's preliminary application and medical documentation, recognizing immediately that this adoption would require careful consideration given the applicant's recent cardiac episode and age-related limitations. As they walked through the shelter's main corridor toward the adoption kennels, Bill found himself drawn to the symphony of animal sounds echoing from every direction. Dogs of all sizes and ages pressed against their kennel doors, each hoping to catch the attention of potential adopters. James began pointing out several older German Shepherds and mixed breeds who might suit Bill's needs for a calm, low-maintenance companion. But Bill's attention was suddenly captured by a distinctive sound that cut through all other noise like a laser beam. It was a whimper unlike any other. Not the hopeful bark of dogs seeking attention, nor the frustrated whining of animals eager for exercise, but something far more profound and heartbreaking. The sound seemed to emanate from deep emotional pain, a vocalization that spoke of loss and abandonment in ways that transcended normal animal communication. Bill stopped walking abruptly, his head tilted as he tried to locate the source of that haunting cry. What was that? Bill asked, his voice suddenly tense with recognition he couldn't quite place. James paused, listening carefully to the various animal sounds surrounding them, unable to identify which specific vocalization had caught the older man's attention. They followed the sound deeper into the kennel area, past rows of hopeful face and wagging tails, until they reached kennel number 47 near the back corner off the facility. Inside the kennel sat a 6-month-old German Shepherd, his black and tan coat dulled by weeks of poor appetite and stress. The dog was pressed against the upper wall of his enclosure, his intelligent, dark eyes staring blankly at nothing, his body language speaking of complete dejection and surrender. This was clearly an animal who had given up hope, who had stopped believing that anything good would ever happen again. The nameplate on his kennel read simply, Tucker Surrendered Stray. The moment Tucker's eyes met Bill's, the transformation was instantaneous and electric. The listless, defeated animal suddenly came alive, launching himself forward against the chain-link door of his kennel with such force that James Wilson stepped back in alarm. Tucker's entire body began shaking with emotion as he pressed his muzzle through the wire mesh, releasing sounds that could only be described as cries of pure joy mixed with devastating heartbreak. These weren't typical dog vocalizations. Tucker was crying, actually producing tears that streamed down his muzzle as he pawed frantically at the kennel door, trying desperately to reach the man standing just beyond his grasp. His tail wagged so violently that his entire back end swayed back and forth, while his voice produced a series of whimpers, barks, and almost human-like sobs that brought tears to the eyes of everyone within hearing distance. Tucker, Bill whispered, his own voice breaking as he dropped to his knees in front of the kennel. Tucker, is that really you, boy? The response was immediate and overwhelming. Tucker's cries intensified as he recognized his name, his paws working frantically against the wire as if he could somehow tear through the barrier separating them. His eyes never left Bill's face, communicating volumes about their shared experiences and mutual love in a language that transcended words. James Wilson stood transfixed by the emotional display unfolding before him. In 15 years of shelter work, he had witnessed many touching reunions between lost pets and their families, but nothing compared to the raw emotion radiating from both man and dog in this moment. Other visitors and staff members had gathered to witness the scene, many wiping away tears as they observed the obvious bond between the elderly veteran and the traumatized German Shepherd. You know this dog? James asked, Thought's answer was evident in every gesture and sound passing between Bill and Tucker. Bill pressed his fingers through the chain-link fence, allowing Tucker to lick his hands frantically while continuing his emotional vocalizations. The physical contact seemed to intensify Tucker's joy and desperation simultaneously, as if he feared this reunion might be another cruel dream. "This is my dog," Bill said softly, his own tears flowing freely now. "Or he was. I raised him from 8 weeks old. His name is Tucker." The words carried the weight of months of separation, worry, and mutual heartbreak. Bill's voice gained strength as he continued. "He belonged to my wife Sarah before she passed away. He's been my family, my companion, my reason for getting up every morning." James quickly pulled up Tucker's intake information on his tablet, his expression growing troubled as he reviewed the surrender documentation. According to the records, Tucker had been brought to the shelter 3 weeks earlier by the Henderson family, who claimed they had found him wandering as a stray in their neighborhood. They had provided no ownership documentation, no veterinary records, and no contact information for potential previous owners. "Sir, I think we need to sit down and talk," James said gently, his experience telling him there were complications brewing beneath the surface of this emotional reunion. "There seems to be some confusion," a helter whisked open as Bill Anderson stepped about Tucker's history, "and I need to understand exactly what happened before we can proceed with any adoption process." But Bill wasn't listening to bureaucratic concerns. He was completely focused on Tucker, who continued crying with such intensity that other dogs in Irby kennels had begun responding with their own vocalizations of distress and confusion. The reunion was so emotionally raw, so obviously genuine. It was clear this represented far more than a normal human-animal relationship. This was a bond forged through shared experience, mutual care, and profound love that had been violently severed by circumstance beyond either participant's control. Tucker's physical condition became more apparent as Bill observed him closely. The once vibrant puppy, who had bounded through their house with endless energy, was now significantly underweight, his ribs visible beneath his dull coat. His eyes, while bright with recognition and joy at seeing Bill, showed the telltale signs of chronic stress and depression. Most heartbreaking was his obvious desperation to maintain physical contact with Bill, as if he feared that any break-in connection might result in another devastating abandonment. James Wilson found himself facing an unprecedented situation. The emotional evidence of the relationship between Bill and Tucker was undeniable. Yet, the legal documentation suggested a completely different story. The Henderson family surrender papers would typically take precedence in determining Tucker's legal status, but obvious deception in their stray claim created a complex ethical and legal dilemma that would require careful navigation. Mr. Anderson, James said carefully, "I believe you're telling the truth about your relationship with Tucker, but we have legal documentation that conflicts with your claim. I'm going to need you to provide proof of ownership, and we'll need to investigate how Tucker ended up with the people who surrendered him." The bureaucratic requirements felt cold and heartless in the face of such obvious emotional truth. But James had responsibilities to both the animals in his care and the legal frameworks that governed his facility. Bill's face showed a mixture of hope and growing concern as he realized that loving Tucker and being able to take him home were two entirely different challenges. The reunion that should have been a moment of pure joy was becoming complicated by legal hurdles, medical limitations, and administrative requirements that threatened to keep them separated despite their obvious bond. Tucker seemed to sense the uncertainty in the adult conversation, his cries becoming more desperate as he continued his frantic attempts to reach Bill through the kennel barriers. The scene had attracted significant attention from other shelter visitors and staff members, many of whom were documenting the emotional reunion on their phones. Within hours, videos and Photos of Tucker's dramatic recognition of Bill would begin circulating on social media, setting the stage for a community debate about love versus logistics, emotional needs versus practical requirements, and the true meaning of family in all its forms. In the shelter's quiet consultation room, Bill Anderson sat across from James Wilson with Tucker curled peacefully in his lap for the first time in 3 weeks. The transformation in the German Shepherd's demeanor was remarkable. Fellows withdrawn. Animal who had refused food and human contact was now alert, engaged, and visibly relaxed as Bill's weathered hands stroked his fur. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, the shelter's veterinary, joined them to discuss the complex situation that was rapidly evolving beyond standard adoption protocols. "Mr. Anderson, I need you to walk me through exactly what happened," James said gently, his tablet ready to document what he suspected would be a story of deception and abandonment. Bill's voice was steady, but filled with emotion as he recounted the events following his heart attack. His daughter Emily's well-intentioned but misguided decision to rehome Tucker, the Henderson family's initial enthusiasm, and the devastating discovery that they had surrendered Tucker to the shelter while claiming he was a stray. Dr. Martinez listened intently while examining Tucker's physical condition, noting the obvious signs of stress-related weight loss and behavioral depression that had marked his 3 weeks in shelter care. "This dog has been severely traumatized," she explained, her professional demeanor softened by obvious sympathy for both animal and owner. German Shepherds are particularly susceptible to separation anxiety and abandonment trauma. Tucker's been refusing to eat regularly, won't interact with staff or volunteers, and spends most of his time pressed against the back wall of his kennel. The immediate obstacle became clear as James reviewed the shelter's adoption requirements against Bill's current circumstance. At 71, with a recent major cardiac episode and significant income limitations, Bill failed to meet several standard criteria for adopting a large young dog that would require extensive exercise, training, and veterinary care over the next 12 to 15 years. The cruel irony was that Tucker clearly belonged with Bill, yet the very system designed to protect animals was preventing their reunion. "I understand your concerns," Bill said quietly, his military training evident in his direct approach to difficult conversations. "I know I'm not the ideal adopter on paper. My heart function is at 45%. I'm on 6 different medications, and I have toten cardiac rehabilitation 3 times a week. But this dog and I understand each other in ways that go beyond your checklist requirements." Tucker, as if sensing the gravity of the conversation, pressed closer to Bill and rested his head against the older man's chest. The gesture was both protective and comforting, demonstrating the deep bond that had sustained them both through Sarah's illness and death. Dr. Martinez observed the interaction with growing conviction that separating them again would be detrimental to Bothman and dog. Word of the reunion had already begun spreading through the shelter's volunteer network and onto social media platforms. A volunteer named Patricia Chun had recorded Tucker's initial recognition of Bill and posted the video to Facebook with the caption, "True love has no expiration date." Within hours, the post had been shared hundreds of times, generating passionate responses from animal lovers, veterans advocates, and people who saw the story as a symbol of loyalty triumphing over bureaucracy. The community response was swift and divided. Supporters rallied around the narrative of a faithful dog being reunited with its beloved owner, viewing any obstacle to their reunion as heartless bureaucracy, prioritizing rules over compassion. "Love doesn't care about age or income," wrote one commenter. "This man and his dog belong together, period." Others took a more practical stance, arguing fate-responsible pet ownership requires adequate resources and physical capability to provide proper care throughout an animal's lifetime. Emily Anderson Mitchell learned about the situation through a Facebook notification from a friend who had recognized her father's name in several posts. The video of Tucker's emotional reunion with Bill hit her like a physical blow, forcing her to confront the magnitude of her failure and the suffering she had inadvertently caused. Her immediate reaction was defensive anger. Anger at the Henderson family for their deception, at the shelter for making the situation public, and at herself for creating the mess that had nearly destroyed both her father and Tucker. Emily's husband, David, viewed the situation through his characteristic lens of financial pragmatism. During their heated phone conversation that evening, he reminded Emily of their own family's obligations and the financial strain of supporting her father's needs. "Your dad can barely afford his own medications," David argued. "How is he going to handle emergency vet bills, quality dog food, and all the other expenses that come with a large dog? You're being emotional instead of practical." The tension escalated when Emily announced her intention to drive down from Portland to handle the situation personally. David's ultimatum was clear and cold. "You need to choose between enabling your father's unrealistic decisions and protecting our family's financial future. We can't keep throwing money at problems we didn't create." Emily found herself caught between her husband's pressure, her father's obvious happiness with Tucker, and her own guilt over the chain of events she had set in motion. Dr. Martinez, meanwhile, had been conducting her own research into the therapeutic benefits of companion animals for cardiac patients. The medical literature supported what she was observing in real time. Bill's vital signs had measurably improved during his time with Tucker. His stress levels appeared reduced and his overall demeanor was more positive than when he had arrived at the shelter alone. There's compelling evidence that the emotional support Tucker provides could actually benefit Mr. Anderson's cardiac recovery, she told James during their private consultation. The shelter's board of directors faced an unprecedented decision that would set precedent for future adoptions involving senior citizens in special circumstances. Board President Margaret Foster, herself a 73-year-old widow, advocated for flexibility in applying adoption criteria. "We need to consider the whole picture," she argued during an emergency board meeting. "Sometimes the best home isn't the one that looks perfect on paper, but the one where love and understanding already exist." Opposition came from board members who worried about liability issues and the message that bending rules might send to other potential adopters. "If we make exceptions for one person, how do we justify denying author applicants who don't meet our criteria?" asked board member Robert Chun. "Our standards exist to protect animals from situations where owners can't provide adequate care." James Wilson found himself proposing a creative compromise that would satisfy both the shelter's protective instincts and the obvious emotional needs of both Bill and Tucker. He suggested a foster-to-adopt arrangement that would allow Bill to take Tucker home immediately while providing ongoing support and monitoring from the shelter's professional staff. The arrangement would include monthly veterinary checkups, access to volunteer dog walkers during Bill's medical appointments, and emergency support if his health declined. The foster arrangement would also address the financial concerns that had dominated of the debate. The shelter would subsidize Tucker's veterinary care and provide access to donated dog food and supplies, reducing the financial burden on Bill's fixed income. Local volunteers had already offered to help with dog walking, yard maintenance, and transportation to medical appointments, creating a support network that could sustain the arrangement long term. Bill's response to the proposed solution was immediate and grateful. "I'll accept any help you're willing to provide," he said with the humility of a man who had learned that pride could be a luxury heckled and afford. "All I want is the chance to prove that love can overcome limitations, and that sometimes the most practical thing you can do is follow your heart." Tucker seemed to understand that important decisions were being made about his future. Throughout the long meeting, he remained calm and attentive, occasionally nuzzling Bill's hand or looking toward the door as if anticipating their departure together. His behavior demonstrated the intelligence and emotional sensitivity that German Shepherds are known for, qualities that would serve him well in adapting to Bill's current physical limitations. Dr. Martinez volunteered to serve as Tucker's primary veterinarian and to monitor both his physical and emotional progress throughout the foster period. "I want to document this case," she told the board. "If successful, this could become a model for other shelters dealing with similar situations involving senior adopters and emotionally bonded animals." The final approval came with a 90-day evaluation period, during which the shelter would assess whether the arrangement was truly benefiting both Bill and Tucker. Success will be measured not just by Tucker's physical health, but by both participants' emotional well-being and the sustainability of their daily routines. The decision represented a victory for compassion over rigid bureaucracy, but it also carried the weight of proving that love could indeed triumph over practical limitations. As the paperwork was being prepared, Tucker remained glued to Bill's side, as if afraid that any distance might result in another devastating separation. The transformation from the depressed, withdrawn animal he had been just hours earlier was remarkable to everyone who witnessed it. For the first time in 3 weeks, Tucker's tail wagged with genuine happiness, and his eyes showed the spark of intelligence and hope that had been extinguished by abandonment and trauma. The community response to the shelter's decision was overwhelmingly positive, with supporters praising the innovative approach to a complex situation. However, Emily's arrival from Portland would soon test the fragile arrangement and force all parties to confront whether good intentions could overcome family dysfunction and financial realities. The confrontation erupted in the shelter's lobby, 3 days after Bill had successfully brought Tucker home under the foster-to-adopt arrangement. Emily Anderson Mitchell stormed through Thintran's doors with the fury of a woman who felt her authority had been undermined and her practical decision subverted by sentiment. Her face was flushed from the 6-hour drive from Portland, and her designer clothing looked incongruous in the utilitarian shelter environment as she demanded to speak with whoever was responsible for this ridiculous situation. James Wilson emerged from his office to find Emily in heated conversation with the front desk staff, her voice carrying across the lobby as she expressed outrage that the shelter had enabled her father's irresponsible behavior without consent. His family, Tucker, who had been brought along for his first follow-up appointment, immediately tensed at Emily's aggressive tone, pressing closer to Bill's legs while his ears flattened against his shed in obvious distress. "You had no right to give him that dog," Emily declared, pointing an accusatory finger at James while ignoring Tucker's submissive posture. "My father is a 71-year-old cardiac patient living on a fixed income. He can barely take care of himself, let alone a large dog that will require thousands of dollars in veterinary care over its lifetime." Her words carried the sharp edge of financial anxiety mixed with genuine concern for her father's welfare, but they also revealed the fundamental disconnect between her practical worldview and Bill's emotional needs. Bill's response was measured, but firm, drawing on decades of military experience in handling conflict situations. "Emily, Tucker isn't just a dog to me. He's family. He was your mother's companion during her final months, and he's been my anchor since she passed away. You understand your concerns about money and my health, but some things are more important than spreadsheets and risk assessments." The argument that followed exposed deep fractures in their relationship that had been developing since Sarah's death. Emily felt burdened by her father's needs and resentful of decisions that seemed to increase his vulnerability and by extension her own responsibilities as his only child. David's pressure from Portland had intensified her anxiety about financial obligations, creating a zero-sum mentality where any expense related to Bill's care threatened her own family's security. Dr. Martinez attempted to mediate by presenting the medical evidence she had been documenting about the positive effects of Tucker's presence on Bill's cardiac health. Your father's blood pressure has stabilized significantly since reuniting with Tucker, she explained, showing Emily the data from Bill's recent monitoring sessions. His medication compliance has improved, his stress indicators are down, and his overall emotional state is markedly better than when he arrived here alone. Emily dismissed the medical evidence with the skepticism of someone who had been trained to view emotional arguments as manipulation tactics. Of course, he seems happier, she said sarcastically. Everyone's happy when they get what they want, regardless of whether it's good for them. My father is acting like a child who's been given candy for dinner. Her words struck Bill like physical blows, reducing their relationship to a parent-child dynamic that ignored his autonomy and dismissed his judgment. The financial arguments became increasingly heated as Emily detailed the mounting costs of Bill's cardiac care, medication expenses, and the inevitable progression of age-related health issues that would require more intensive and expensive interventions. Dad, you're spending money on dog food that you should be saving for your own medical emergencies, she said, her voice rising with frustration. What happens when you need emergency surgery or have to move to assisted living? You'll have wasted resources on a dog instead of planning for your own future. Tucker's behavior during the confrontation demonstrated the emotional intelligence that had made him such an effective companion for Sarah during her illness. He seemed to understand that Emily represented a threat to his security with Bill, and his protective instincts manifested in subtle positioning between Emily and Bill, while maintaining a non-aggressive posture that avoided escalating the conflict. His obvious distress at the family discord was evident to everyone except Emily, who was too focused on her financial arguments to notice the animal's emotional state. The shelter's volunteer network had been monitoring the situation through social media updates and word-of-mouth reports about Bill and Tucker's successful adjustment to their new routine. When news of Emily's intervention reached the community supporters, the response was swift and passionate. Within hours, the shelter's Facebook page was flooded with comments defending Bill's right to keep Tucker and criticizing Emily's interference in what many viewed as a heartwarming success story. This is exactly what's wrong with our society, wrote one commenter. Children who think they know better than their parents and prioritize money over love. Mr. Anderson earned the right to make his own decisions about his life and his dog. The comments section became a battleground between supporters of family autonomy and advocates for practical elder care, with Emily finding herself portrayed as the villain in a narrative that had already captured the community's imagination. Local news outlets picked up the story as the debate gained momentum, framing it as a broader discussion about senior citizens' rights, family dynamics, and the role of companion animals in elderly care. A reporter from the Riverside Press Enterprise interviewed several neighbors, who spoke glowingly about the positive changes they had observed in Bill since Tucker's return. Mrs. Patricia Hayes, who had witnessed both Bill's collapse and Tucker's loyal vigil, became a particularly compelling advocate for their continued nourish.